Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news, which as usual, has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. Hopefully you are having an amazing day. We have lots of news to get through in this video. I want to start things out with a small update to a video I put out yesterday. During that video, I detailed many of the rumours that have been swirling around for Zen 3. Indeed, late last year, I put out a whole bunch of leaks concerning the IPC of Zen 3, the clock frequency improvements, the fact that the core count would be basically identical to what we have now, and so on and so on. But yesterday, Jim at Adored TV also put out a video, and much of his information did tally up with what I was told, which was great, obviously, because more people who say the same thing equals as a greater likelihood that that is actually accurate. But Jim's source also said that according to what they'd been told, the Milan sampling had not gone as smoothly as what perhaps AMD would have hoped for, and the early samples also do not have SMT enabled. Well, one of my sources actually wrote to me today, and they provided us a couple of small nuggets of information. The first is that they told me that Milan's sampling has been going on for months now, so there have been several months of Milan actually sampling to customers. But furthermore, they told me that SMT is definitely enabled in those samples. Obviously, I can't provide details of what this source is, but they have been pretty accurate in the past with stuff. The only thing you can say that would cast some doubt on that is there haven't been leaked benchmarks yet that have been discovered online. However, you need to take into consideration that often, particularly in the early days, these samples are treated like they are gold, or perhaps even more precious than gold, and it really requires someone to accidentally leave an Ethernet cable or something like that plugged in, connect online, and of course for the benchmark to leak like that. Or it's possible that someone just has not discovered the benchmark yet, which is also, a possibility. Sometimes benchmarks are just obfuscated online, or they just haven't found them yet because there's some random ass engineering sample code name or whatever. And I'm not saying Jim's source is wrong. I just figure that at the very least it would be only right for me to provide kind of this updated information, and then obviously we can eventually know the truth, I suppose. Anyway, I think the vast majority of this video is going to focus on the PlayStation 5 because there have been some rumours swirling around thanks to a couple of comments that have been online. And one of those is a YouTube comment by the name of Jeff. I'm not going to say his last name for privacy reasons, as well, YouTube and privacy and all that stuff, and obviously I will be hiding his face. But obviously this comment has gained a lot of traction. And he claims, I'm not going to read out this entire thing verbatim because you can read it on screen. They basically says that the collective feeling amongst developers is Sony have screwed up the generation. They underestimated Microsoft and were overconfident. They said that there's going to be delays for the PlayStation 5 and heating issues to rival the Xbox 360. And they also said that, don't you find it odd that they haven't shown the hardware despite pressure from Microsoft? The underlying issue was Sony didn't realise the form factor needed to be changed, and now having to completely redesign it and have it look more like a tower. And also have said that it's odd that they've not shown off launch titles, and the reason is because developers don't know how to optimize the software yet, because it can't deliver consistent performance. And basically said people he knows closest to the PlayStation have said that it's really bad, and Sony are just hoping that the PlayStation name can weather for a couple more years. Now, there's actually a lot I have to kind of dissect with this. First of all, Jez Corden over at Windows Central was initially saying pretty much the same thing, but then somewhat retracted this information. Now, I want to first of all tackle the Xbox 360 thing with the overheating. The main reason that the Xbox 360 overheated and kind of did the red ring of death was the clamp system that Microsoft used. You can do some Googling about that if you want more information, but basically it just put too much pressure on the board, and because of that, it essentially ruined the traces of the board and blah blah blah. It's a pretty well documented issue. So it wasn't really overheating problems for the Xbox 360. Instead, it was more a slight design flaw with the clamp system to attach the cooler to the PCB. And you could actually pretty easily fix this yourself, funnily enough, with a slightly different mounting mechanism. And people were also doing other things like the towel trick to kind of try to reflow the solder on the board, and then they would do a change of clamp. And there was even a lady, I've forgotten her name, I'm really sorry, but there was a lady who even put out a tutorial about this, and she showed how to actually fix it with several washers, and it didn't take her too long at all. It was pretty damn brilliant. So yeah, technically the Xbox 360 did have issues because of heat, but it was only because of the clamp mechanism. But if you change the clamp mechanism, then it wouldn't have been a problem. So in other words, the heat wasn't really... the heat was the catalyst, but the cause was the mounting mechanism, is, I guess, the succinctest way I can put it. Anyway, secondly, this user, and once again, I'm not going to say his full name, has had history of... having doom and gloom with the PlayStation before. But the other thing as well is that I'm pretty damn certain that this is completely and utterly bogus for several other reasons. For one, you may recall I put out a video recently where one of my sources detailed why Sony have not actually shown the PlayStation 5. If you haven't watched the video, I'd encourage you to do so, because obviously, I want you to watch my videos. But the too long didn't read is that there's a couple of reasons. One, Sony want to show the console alongside largely finished playable segments of games. In other words, code which is pretty close to being finished. And at the moment, developers are just still working on the games. And this is the same for Microsoft as well. This is not, haha, Microsoft or Sony are falling behind. This is just how game development works, and they want to get as close as possible. You can also say much the same with Microsoft. It's not like we've seen exactly a lot of titles running on the Xbox Series X. Yes, Microsoft have showed older games, which is more than what Sony have. And furthermore, Microsoft have also, of course, shown a couple of other games like Gears 5, which they showed off to Digital Foundry. But it's by far not finished code. And obviously, at the end of the day, this is not like Xbox Series X exclusive stuff. And I'm also not criticizing Microsoft. I think it's the right decision. Marketing wise, it's very different to how Sony are approaching things, but I don't think one is right and one is wrong. It's just what Microsoft are choosing to do. The other thing is that I was told that the design for the PlayStation 5 is innovative. I didn't get that expanded on, but I was told that there was concerns that Sony would not be able to put out a system like that for MP, mass production, quantities. And so what Sony didn't want to do is put out a handmade console. Now, I do think Sony screwed up a little bit with the marketing messaging, especially with how they kind of did the road to PS5. But it is what it is. Like, they can't undo that. Furthermore, think of it this way. They don't need to show optimized titles anyway. Like, at the very least, Sony could show something off if this was the reason. Like, they could easily show something off. It doesn't need to be optimized, because they could just show off small snippets of gameplay and then just stick a "this is not final" on there, and people wouldn't be any the wiser. It's not like, even if, let's just say that this was true. Let's say that it's true, and it's not, but let's just say it was, and let's say the clocks dipped 10%, 15% on average, which they won't, but let's just say they did. That would not be enough for people to say, oh my god, Sony have overheating issues. Even 20%, because early code, no one expects the thing to be optimized 100%. It's not like you're going to be like, oh my gosh, like it missed 1 or 2 frames a second here or there. You're just going to say, well, of course it does. It's non-final code. You can't really judge anything that's non-final. So I'm going to give you a bit of a story of how consoles are designed. Now, I'm going to be skipping several steps here, including how they come to the conclusion of what specifications the system will reach, and so on and so on. But basically, to begin with, they will start bringing up the SoC. Obviously, that will be designed. They will start testing the SoC. And then when they're fairly happy with what they feel appropriate specifications, and the SoC is not having massive errors and so on, they will then enter electronic verification testing. So EVT has multiple stages and multiple parts of the kit. So it'll be like EVT1, EVT2, and so on and so on. And then as they get closer and closer to kind of like the final production stage of EVT, the components will then basically be run at maximum frequencies or even higher than maximum frequencies to make sure that the power and heat is manageable and basically it doesn't just crash and explode for obvious reasons. This is A, for safety reasons, and B, to make sure that the equipment can operate in a variety of different temperatures and conditions. Because obviously your house, you may like it a nice warm temperature, like you might like it as 80 degrees, and whereas I might prefer my room to be like 50 degrees or what have you. Plus, obviously, even if you don't have air conditioning or temperature control, you don't know what environment it's going to be in anyway. Someone could stuff it right, kind of inside of an entertainment cabinet, and it doesn't really get much airflow, and someone else could have it right in the middle of the room. So all of these things need to be tested and figure out what the thermal limits are and what the limits of the hardware are. So to this end, EVT kits are essentially put in what you can kind of say is like chillers, and they will also be put in, I don't want to call it an oven, but essentially something to heat the console up way beyond what you would reasonably use the kit. So after that, the design will finally go into DVT, which is design verification testing. And at this point, they will be testing various physical configurations of the board based on what they feel the mass production design will be. And this will continue and continue and continue as new revisions of, let's say, APUs, in other words, new silicon comes out, if they have better quality silicon. And this stuff is not unique to Sony. Microsoft will do much the same thing as well. So this is not some unique and special thing that Microsoft are losing out on. Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, all of these companies need to do pretty much the same thing. I want to be abundantly clear here. If this had been a problem in the early bring-up of the console, such as an early phase of DVT, once again design verification testing, it will now have been resolved. Certainly way before it hits mass production / retail models, in other words. You may also remember that Mark Cerny, when he was speaking to Eurogamer, said that currently developers basically choose kind of power plans for the APU, whether the CPU or the GPU get kind of like performance priority, power priority. But that is, once again, because it is a development kit. And clearly, when the console hits retail, this of course will not happen. Basically, the CPU / GPU will automatically prioritize workloads based upon what's going on with the utilization of the CPU and the GPU. So I don't believe that this is a problem at all. From a personal standpoint, I actually think that this generation of consoles upcoming is actually more interesting than the previous generation of consoles. Not just because I think that this generation is going to be really interesting in terms of the games that are coming out, but also both systems have very unique characteristics, and it's clear that the PlayStation 5 has some major drawbacks over the Xbox, that's just a fact. But you can also say much the same thing with the Xbox as well. And I'm going to be very curious how all of this comes together. For example, we still don't know how the memory configuration of the Xbox is going to play out. The Xbox definitely has a major memory bandwidth advantage, but only for a portion of the data, 10 gigabytes, with the rest of the data, of course, needing to be shifted into slower portions of the memory. I've gone over this extensively before, but this can also have some ramifications later on. What if OS reserves change? Now, of course, OS reserves can't increase, but in the future, one thing they could do is to say, you know what, we've managed to shrink down the code of the OS, and we're going to give developers an extra 256 or 512 or whatever megabytes of memories. But obviously, that's going to have to be in the slower pool of memory. Whereas if Sony changed their reserves, they have 448 gigabytes per second regardless. Then again, I'm definitely told that the PlayStation 5 could be memory bandwidth limited with only 448 gigabytes per second. And someone else has said, and this was a source that I've mentioned a couple of times now, and they told me that there was infighting between Sony of Japan and Sony of Europe, and Sony of America, not Sony of Europe. And basically, one of them wants to increase the amount of memory bandwidth for the system, but so far that hasn't looked like it's happened. But there is a lot to like, for me anyway, about both designs. I am curious how the variable frequency is going to affect development of the PlayStation 5. It looks like, according to Mark Cerny and all I'm hearing, the clock frequencies don't really differ too much, but then again there is that slight variance, and I have to say, one of the definite benefits of the Xbox, especially with early code, is the fact that you can have the CPU run faster, albeit have SMT disabled, so that definitely is kind of interesting from the perspective of developers, and may mean porting games from the current generation to the next generation is a lot easier in that regard. I'm extremely excited, if you couldn't tell, about both systems, because I genuinely think that it's going to be just a really good time for gamers. And as a PC gamer primarily, I'm really excited with what's going on with the Xbox. I think it's going to definitely really benefit PC gaming in the longer term. I think it's going to take a while, but I think longer term, the Xbox and PC are going to have some really great synergy there. And if you are an Xbox fan and you've not already subscribed to the channel, I would highly suggest you do so, because there's going to be some really cool content for you coming out tomorrow. I'm trying to balance as much as possible PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and all the other coverage, and I think it's high time that I release some stuff for the Xbox, so that will be tomorrow, and I'm really happy about the content that I've been working on, so definitely stick with me if you want that stuff, as it's going to explain a few things regarding the console, as well as like PC stuff as well. I think though that just about does it in this video. There's a lot more I could add to this, but frankly, I think that just about covers it satisfactorily. Thanks to everyone who's been reaching out to me on Twitter, as I've been absolutely inundated with messages and tags and all of that stuff, and I really do appreciate it. That is absolutely fantastic. And thank you very much, of course, for watching the video as well. If you have enjoyed it then and want more of my ramblings, then feel free to, of course, subscribe to the channel, and also, of course, ring the bell icon, because we know how the land of YouTube's work. You can also find me on, of course, social media, which, as I mentioned a moment ago, I'm on quite frequently. I really can't speak today. And you can also, of course, find us on Patreon and Amazon affiliate links, if you so desire, which are naturally linked in the description of the video as well. Don't feel you have to, but if you're going to be buying like a new game or something like that from Amazon, and you feel like using the Amazon affiliate links, it does give us a few pennies. With all that said though, take care of yourselves, have an amazing day. Bye for now.